And we're live with parsimonious and perspicacious. That applies to both of them. Right, and we're going to look at this graphic. Can you both see it?
Yep.
Right, I'm just wondering why both of you are not moving much, but right, I'll just put that diary over there. So then, what's the best thing for me to do? Should I read it out?
Yeah, I think that would be the best.
Oh, right,
Sure.
okay, yeah. Oh, yeah, because Haley is joining on a little thingy, a little mobile device. Right then, strategy has to do with identifying the ways and means necessary and sufficient to achieve a well-defined goal. But not just any goal is of interest to the rationals, the NTs. Invariably, the goal that rationals set for themselves is increasing the efficiency of systems. And I'll give an example later on about how these 4 examples of the strategic intellect are involved in, say, a military project to develop a fighter aircraft or something. Because they all sort of come into play, these sort of multi-decade projects. Some rationals concern themselves mainly with social systems, such as families and companies. That's what Victor does. He's interested in social systems, and probably Gregory Bateson as well, anthropologist, NTP. Apparently, he had 4 wives. At one point, he forgot that he was married when he was chatting this woman up. So maybe ENTP, not sure. While others are concerned with organic systems, such as plants and animals, and still others with mechanical systems, such as computers and aircraft and automobiles. But no matter what system they're working with, NTs want to increase the efficient operation of that system. Anything to disagree with so far?
No?
No. Okay. Other sorts of objectives are of considerably less interest, and so are given little effort. The way rationals reach their objective of maximizing efficiency in systems is by analyzing systems in search of inefficiency, which is to say that they look for error in the order or the organization of systems. Order and organization, he's defined them in a particular Keirsey way, and he'll explain that in a couple of pages. But I'll just say for now as a preview, order is the sequential operation or hierarchy. So hierarchy would be more for ENTJ, and the sequential operations for the sequencing for INTJ. So you got the TE and the NI working together. An organization, he means these systems where you got multiple variables working together at the same time and influencing each other. Right then, so, okay, now, I was just a little concerned that both of your thumbnails not moving.
I
Then
think
I
we're
don't know
just
what-
being still.
Pardon?
Yeah.
I think we're just being still.
Okay, right.
I'm not sure what you're really expecting from us.
Right, no, it's not,
Right.
when I click on your squares, you move, it's just that the thumbnail isn't animated when I'm showing it, but it's okay, as long as I can hear you there. Indeed, perhaps the most important thing to understand about the strategic intellect is that it is activated by errors found in complex systems. In other words, rationals are ever on the lookout for systemic problems and are bent on solving them. They're the problem solvers, one and all. So, any comments from either of you on that?
Pretty accurate.
So what would be examples for you, Haley, of looking for errors and things? Besides,
Well,
go on.
besides,
You may bring up the NASM.
yeah, well, that too. I mean, of course, with everything I'm doing in the gym to build myself up and, you know, the way I'm going about it and everything I'm looking at, whenever I'm reading something, I'm trying to pull from my mind everything I've ever read prior and being like, you know, looking at all the problems. Is this going to be a problem with everything I'm doing now? I'm just constantly looking for what could go wrong and why it could go wrong and if it's going to even work. And the thing that kind of sucks, and I guess it's not just this line of information, but any line, is that you know, when you come across new information, you're constantly worrying, is this going to work? How do I go about figuring out if this is going to work? Is this the best way to go about it? You know, just, I guess that's just something that's been inherent in me whenever I'm reading something, is, you know, trying to figure out, is this right? How do I go about figuring out if this is right? Is this the most efficient? You know, where are the problems? Where are the errors? Is, you know, this, I'm sorry, I'm losing words right now. Is this like facet of the way I want to go about it? Is this going to impede facet B and facet C and et cetera, et cetera? So that paragraph that you just read, I mean, it seems like something I've always inherently done.
Yeah, there's tacit prioritization very much easily seen in the way INTJs go about something, which is what stood out to me when you were saying that your analysis of variables as you're doing something extends to the point where you wonder if an aspect of one thing will hinder your progress in another. And I do that too, but I don't think that that's as emphasized in me. When I'm going about analysis, that's almost a I never set out with that in mind. Understanding where two of my motives may hinder one another comes about as a byproduct of the analysis that I'm doing. I work in a lab, and right now we're studying the activity of certain pain receptors in the human brain, as well as neuronal degeneration as a result of calcium influx. And a lot of what I do there is lower level stuff, but when I do get to participate in the actual analysis of things, I have like a data bank of all the things I know about this, and then what I'm seeing, and I refer to that as a sort of, not a metric, but a starting point for my own understanding of how the organic patterns that are there and what I'm learning don't match or fit what I've already seen, and then extending to looking at new possibilities. So it's not only covering, it's pretty much doing the same thing in a very different way than what you just described. It seems like it has the same outcome.
Saw a little bit of a difference there, folks, with when Haley was talking about what is the right way to look at this and sort of get in the parameters and the metrics, the kind of thing that Dario wrote about in the TE chapter. It was like, what are the things that we're going to look at? What are the measurables? What is the right way to approach this? More of an application of thinking, and then you were saying there, Amanda, about the possibilities and how it fits in with the information. So you see a little bit difference there in the priorities of an INTP resembler and an INTJ resembler.
Well, you know, if I could just interject really quick.
Yep.
When I'm reading something new for the first time, or, you know, maybe just reading something again and I just pick something up because I mean, that happens a lot. You just read something and then you pick up a little bit of information. You're like, wait a minute, how did I not see that before? But anyway, I try to approach things as objectively as I can and be like, you know, I know kind of how I would want this to be, but I have to block out all of that and be like, the truth is the truth. I mean, it just is. And I can't do anything about that. Thank you. So, and also with that being said, I kind of filter things in my mind almost like I have this goal and I want to get there by the best and most efficient means possible. So I just kind of look at, you know, am I going to implement A? Is A better than B? Will A plus B work better? What about A plus C? What about all of them? You know, so I'm just constantly being like, will this work with this? Or how will this create problems with this? And, you know, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, I try to come at it quite objectively because, like, again, I feel like, and I'm not trying to open a whole can of worms here, but I mean, really, in so many instances,
Right.
truth is, it just is. So,
Yeah.
and I'm trying to find that, and yeah, so.
That comes up with in the Keirsey INTJ, like you were saying there, what are the problems ahead? Are we moving forward? Where are the problems? And of course, if you're using a functional model, you can say, oh, that fits in with the NI and the TE. Looking for the contingency thinking, what's going to happen if this problem, the if-thens things. There's a slight little difference in emphasis there. But of course, so yeah, just summarizing for the audience.
Well, I just feel like in everyday life, this is something that's always been a practice I've gravitated towards when I'm setting up my day or, you know, planning something out. I'm thinking, well, you know, we get there and this happens. Well, what if this is shut off and we can't do that? Then what are we going to do then? And this and that. And I mean, I feel like this is just something that everyone should do. I mean, that everyone would do naturally, but I guess not so much.
Well, and there's a certain amount of hesitation myself to be saying, yes, I relate to that. Yes, I relate to that. In the interest of, for the typological practice, defining the subtle edges between types. But I do have a mode, like I definitely look at how things conflict with each other and like the best practice for setting my day up, as you said. But it's, I think as Ben mentioned, it's really a priority thing. So that might happen at a lower level of priority than another an INTJ might have. So I think you're right. I think there's a natural tendency to do that, especially in, I mean, when we look at strategic intellect, that is a cornerstone of the NT temperament itself.
Yeah.
It's not specified to one or the other. So it's, I'm tempted to say you're right. People, like, at least the NTs should be doing this naturally.
And also, we can then start to think about how the other temperaments can do it, but Keirsey conceived the SJ as being the furthest away from it. Maybe because they're not questioning the system as much, and they just want to go with what works. So
yeah, but that's where you run into problems.
Yeah, and so but when you think about in a wartime situation where you've got to get your production up, they just want to stick with the design and just produce as much of that as possible. So the logistics of that and all of the parts, whereas a TINX resembler might want to do a little thing that improves, say, a tank by 5 or 10%, but that has big problems with, okay, this gun is 10% better, but this gun is in short supply. How do we make them all? How do we get all the parts? How do we organize everything? So it tends towards being static and just doing the same thing again and again and getting very good at it and bringing the costs down. And an example of this we can come up with later on is there was a guy in the Soviet Union, Morozov, and he helped on the development of the Soviet tank T-34. I haven't got the control panel, so I can't kill any sound. So he helped with the development of the T-34 tank, and so he got a lot of prestige from that. And then after World War II, Khrushchev didn't want any heavy tanks, and so he said that, oh, you got to produce a medium tank. And so in order to produce this medium tank, Morozov in the Ukraine, in Kharkov, he went back there from Ural-Vagonzavod. He designed the tank, but with so many new technologies. So from an NTP point of view, it's like, yeah, let's have all these technologies. Let's get all this great design. The problem was implementation. Stuff was untested. You try to have an opposed piston design where it doesn't work very well. And so this balance between being innovative and designing something and then being actually able to implement it. And in Keirsey, the NTPs are more towards the innovation and perfecting a design, and the NTJs are more towards the practical application and implementation and organization of those complex systems. Do you think that's fair to say, Haley?
Absolutely. Absolutely, I would. And again, I mean, if I'm ever trying to make something or, you know, go about that, that is, I mean, will it work? That's what matters. I mean, how can I make this work? That's the whole point of me doing this. I mean, yeah, oh, look, I created this cool thing. Great. Does it work? I mean, but again, I have to agree with what was said earlier regarding, you know, everyone can do this. Maybe in some instances, certain types, you know, learn to do it over time, and maybe it's prioritized more in other types. But I think maybe I'm a little bit biased because I feel like I've always kind of done this. So it's hard for me to take a step out of that and be like, okay, well, not everyone does things the way that you do. So
yeah, I mean, what we're saying now about social systems, I mean, TI with FE, we could say, analyzing people and putting them into a system. So we've got Keirsey here, Berens, Galenko, Naranjo has been typed as TI and X, and then Alshra, Bukalov, Wiseband, maybe Catherine Farver. Right then. She's between ESTP and ENTP for me. Right then. Let's just see if everybody's still moving. Yes, I'll move on. Because usually the little squares move.
Ben, I just wasted all my energy on the week. I don't know what you want from me.
No, it's
like, is it actually not moving when you are looking at the images?
Yeah, it's in the little thumbnails at the bottoms and the squares. They literally don't move.
So we're not just being abnormally still today.
No, it's not that. It's not that. And so the reason why it sort of catches my eye is that usually what happens before somebody loses a connection, they're still for about 30 seconds. So that makes me think, oh, they lost connection and are about to drop out. All right, but I'll just orally try and work out that you're both present. Yeah. Complex systems, yes. Problem solvers, one and all, yes. The concept of systems was understood and used by only a handful of behavioral and physical scientists during the first half of the 20th century. Then at mid-century, Norbert Wiener wrote his seminal work on probably cybernetics. All right, then. Here we go. Called cybernetics, meaning by the term network, netics, and governance, cyber, that is network control. He made his concept of cybernetics intelligible to those not conversant with systems theory by borrowing the term feedback from radio technology and using it as a metaphor for circular processes in systems. Maruyama, probably Japanese, would later say that feedback in systems is a matter of mutually causal processes, thus distinguishing sharply between linear and circular causality. Causality, in the view of systems theorists, is always relative to the conditions surrounding an event, as the necessary and sufficient conditions for the occurrence of an event. Rationals never really having much use for the notion of linear causality. Now embraced circular causality with enthusiasm and undertook the construction and reconstruction of complex systems with renewed vigor. So folks, those people who think that Keirsey temperament theory is simplistic haven't read the books.
This is exciting because I love system science. I have a couple blog articles I've written about systems theory, particularly cybernetic control. So I will say I had embraced circular causality with vigor.
Yeah, and it is probably the case because they did talk, they had long INTP conversations that I'm jealous of between David Mark Keirsey and David West Keirsey. West Keirsey being senior. Senior probably learned a lot from junior about this.
Yeah, I'm trying to read all your stuff that you wrote on the side.
Yeah. Oh yeah, order. So he has the NCJs about order, concerned with what follows what, and NTP organizing, concerned with what is simultaneous with what. Right.
That's interesting.
That is very interesting.
Because so it's like you could say that there was a natural preference of the NTPs to be more interested in systems, and NTJs to be more interested in sequencing and order and procedures and steps to achieve goals. And there's a little bit of a difference there between, and then functionally that matches with the NI with the TE, achieving practical objectives and getting the steps correct. And then with how things fit together in the systems with the TI and the NE. And the TI and the NE people are going to think, well, what about this factor? And what about that factor and that factor? And how do they relate to each other? And that's something that we can look at in another Hangout where Keirsey did 11 pages on NT word usage. And I think it was factorial. So it's like, well, what about this factor? What about that factor? How do they go together? The sequence being deductive and the word reference. Oh, yes. Yes, the sequence was deductive. The usage was factorial. And the reference was analytic. That's it. For the NT word usage. All right. Unity in systems is a two-sided matter. On the one hand, there is the unity of order, while on the other hand, there is the unity of organization. Order and organization are different from each other. Order is concerned with what follows what. Organization with what is simultaneous with what. Those rationals interested primarily in order, I call the coordinators. And those primarily interested in organization, I call the engineers. Although, you being INTP resembler, Mr. Keirsey, you changed it to the constructors in personology in 2010. Before we consider what the coordinators and the constructors, engineers, but constructors do, let us study for a moment the distinction between their different objectives. Yes. The one in search of disorder in systems, the other in search of disorganization in systems. So this is where we get some good stuff. So we've got good stuff here about the NTJs. Order, first of all, has two forms. One having to do with above and below, the other with before and after. Some things are of higher order than others. For example, so this is where it gets more towards the ENTJ kind of thinking. For example, a colonel in the army has higher rank than a major higher than a captain higher than a lieutenant, and so on down the ranks to the book private. Lower ranks are said to be subordinate to higher ranks, being as they are of a lower order. This kind of order is hierarchical and is usually referred to as rank order. The other kind of order can be called serial order. For instance, certain technical procedures require a series of actions that must follow in a very specific order. Do you feel seen, Hayley?
Pardon me?
Do you feel seen by that sentence?
Well, more so than the previous paragraph.
Yep. Did you say more so or not more so?
She said more so.
Okay. Take fire in a single action revolver. Here we go. He's getting a little bit of a digression here. Take fire in a single action revolver. First load it, then cock the hammer, then pull the trigger. Reversing this order will not do. Of course, the kind of series that interests rationals is a bit more complex than firing a gun. The preparations for the invasion of Europe in World War II is an example of extreme complexity involving hundreds of planners over a period of years. Any error in the sequencing of operations fraught with peril and inviting disaster.
No,
However, the sequencing of actions, yeah. Any error in the sequencing of operations fraught with peril and inviting disaster. What I was going to say, though, is that there is a little bit of an overlap there with logistics. Because I watch a lot of military stuff and like tick history. and he talks about the poor logistics of the German army and how the German army in World War II was really set up to be tactical. And these are like practical examples of, so what would happen in the tactical intelligence of the German officers is that they would make decisions at the ground level. That was great for achieving tactical objectives, but not great when strategic objectives needed to be achieved, such as capturing the oil fields in the Caucasus. Yes, you might win a local battle, but you move your eye from the point of achieving strategic objectives. And Tick talked about how the German army was very effective in the invasion of France. And he talked about, he compared the war in Russia as as like taking the rules from chess and then going to the rules of Go. I don't know anything to know about the game Go, but he thinks that the game Go is a lot more strategic than chess. And so it works on a tactical level because you're dealing with a smaller country, achieve the objectives, and you've won the war against France. Just take Paris and you've won. In the Soviet Union, it was different. It's about logistics. And the Romans knew this as well, in that when they attacked an enemy, they would go to attack their supply lines. Because once they've got their food, they're stuffed. So these different kinds of intellect where how are you being strategic, how are you being logistical, how are you being tactical? They're sort of like different strengths to people. And so artisans primarily are best at tactical intellect, but they can do some strategic intellect because they have the utilitarian aspect in common, i.e. thinking for themselves and doing it their own way. And that kind of thing. I don't want to go too much into the other intellects. So any comments on the NTJs there from either of you?
You could always take out their paper supply.
Their paper supply, yes. This is a reference to the episode last week we did in Battlestar Galactica where Ron Moore toyed with the idea of having a paper shortage in the fleet instead of a water shortage. Yes, yeah. Someone's agreed in the chat, has agreed with Tick that Go is strategic, chess is tactical. Yeah.
I've never even heard of that. Sounds fun if that's the case.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not quite tactical. It's more depends how we define tactical. Well, you're improvising. It's at the operational level. You sort of get a blend between tactics and other things. But I don't want to digress too much into military theory. Although you can say the diplomatic intellect comes in with alliance building and international diplomacy. Organization on the other, although Keirsey really meant it toward, well, mediating, I suppose. Anyway, that's a different hangout. Organization, on the other hand, has to do with either devising and revising or configuring and reconfiguring complex systems that are composed of parts, not ranks or steps, where the ranks or steps of an ordinal system are separate from one another. The parts of an organizational system are connected organically to each other, such that what happens anywhere in the system reverberates throughout the system. Thus, organizations of... All right, then. I did a little diagram of whatever kind are said to be integrated, every part being present to every other part of the system. So I've got there that especially, so that there's a little bit more lateral with the with those interested in organization, and that comes into mind with the extroverted intuition, and then more linear for the NTJs. Or they're better at disciplining themselves and ignoring the interesting alternatives. Now, coordinators, the NTJs, do the work of what might be called arranging. They change the name of the mastermind to the arranger. in Personology, and then he changed the name of the field marshal to the mobilizer. Again, configuring and reconfiguring. Arranging is the act of determining the various levels of rank, in other words, hierarchy, layers, echelons, or the consecutive steps, sequence, series, succession that are required to achieve long-range objectives. Hierarchical arrangement enables the mobilizing of field forces in conducting campaigns. Serial arrangement, in contrast, enables the entailing of contingencies in a plan of action. And Haley referred to that earlier on. What can go wrong? If-thens. All right. Minimizing negative outcomes as well. And it also matches up with Model G, well humanitarian socionics, in the intuition of time for the NITX being about minimizing the negative. For their part, engineers do the work of constructing. Constructing is the act of determining what parts of a system are... Oh, wait a minute. Constructing is the act of determining what the parts of a system are supposed to do, its mechanism, or what parts of a system are required for it to work, its configuration. Mechanical constructing involves building functional working prototypes, while configurational constructing involves making detailed two-dimensional blueprints and three-dimensional models. And that's about as far outside their head as an INTP gets. It's drawing up a neat plan. And then other ones to implement it. Both kinds of construction are undertaken to determine what structures are necessary and sufficient for the system to do its work most efficiently. Right then. To summarize. Right then. Any comments on what I've said so far in this block?
No, I apologize because I actually, my whole thing just froze, so I had to exit out and then come back in. So I kind of missed a paragraph there.
Okay, I will go back.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
Right then. Okay.
I'm skimming
I
over
feel
it now,
seen
so.
by the engineer paragraph there.
Do you want me to go up a bit? There, NTPs. Yeah.
And again, I find it quite satisfying how what we're seeing now mirrors the brief things that Haley and I had explained earlier about our respective ways of viewing things, because it quite accurately mirrors where I said I was more interested in the organic connection of things to other things and analyzing that to find what's missing or what could be revised. So that is a internal translation of blueprinting and modeling, as he referred to here, even though that's pretty, as you said, pretty outside the head for me. I don't do that much of that. Like, realistically, I don't do any literal blueprinting.
Keirsey is making, it's always important with Keirsey to distinguish when he's talking about the type and when he's talking about the social role. So in these instances, he's talking about almost the job description of the social role that these types are predisposed towards. And so, for example, all ENTPs are not inventing stuff. And if you look at the Enneagram Type 7 levels of health, and you look at level 3, that sounds like the Keirsey ENTP. The ENTP that's not a troll, that is like really got strong TE in applying their intellect and extroverting it into building stuff. So Keirsey's ENTP description starts off with what they are like when they fulfill their intelligent role, and then towards the end he talks about their FI break stuff in terms of debating with their friends and using debate tactics and their friends not liking it when they, and stuff that gets hinted at in terms of FI break. So always to distinguish between the role variant and these are role variants of the strategic intellect.
Yes.
And I'll remind the socionics people that Carl Jung hinted at this kind of thing when he talked about individuation and differentiation. And I will read it out just to hammer the point home. I think in differentiation, where he wrote about, here we go, just happened to, just by chance, here it goes. Actually, it was by chance. Here we go. So this is about the development of the lead function. The very conditions of society enforce a man to apply himself first and foremost to the differentiation of that function which he is either most gifted by nature or which provides his most effective means for social success.
Mm.
There was a big development aspect there.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that then gets into like when we perform, and as you know from Dario's research, Amanda, the more someone does something, it leaves its mark on the brain.
Yes.
Right.
I mean, we've known that since Donald Hebb. Neurons that fire together, wire together. That's the year one psych slogan.
Mm. And so now he's got here a sort of he's got the lining up the role variants with the different aspects of different examples. Well, you can see, I'll just read it out. Arrangement works to reduce disorder in systems, the two forms of it being the mobilizing of campaign forces and the entailing of contingency plans. Construction, in contrast, works to reduce disorganization in systems, the two forms of it being devising of prototypes and the designing of models. To help visualize the relationship between these two many concepts of strategic operations, consider the following diagram. Another point of emphasis in Keirsey temperament theory is that his emphasis was on trying to find out what people do well. Jung's emphasis was to find out what people have in mind in order to help in therapy.
Mm.
Most people, when they encounter Keirsey, will read, say, his type profiles, and the type profiles concentrate a little bit more on the role variants and intelligent social roles, whereas at the level of temperament, that's where he gets into all of the motivation stuff and self-image and there's the self-esteem of the types at the temperament level. So most people won't read those sections. If they read Keirsey at all, they'll read the profiles. Right. Construction, in contrast, works by reducing... Oh, I've read that one. To help visualize the relationship between these many concepts of strategic operations, consider the following diagram. Right then.
Ben, how does your handwriting not just overwhelm you?
What do you mean, how does it not overwhelm me? I've color-coded it, and I can... If it was all the same color, it would overwhelm me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Why is it overwhelming you?
Well, I mean, hey, different strokes for different folks, right? I mean, whatever you like, but it just, I don't know where to look first.
Yeah, I mean, that's the benefit of that. But so, given that you two are both outside of my head, how do you see what I've put on screen, Amanda, in comparison?
To be honest, initially, I tend to ignore it, start where I think makes sense, and then figure out what you've done by doing that.
Right.
At least tangentially, I think I can get an idea through that.
Yep.
Especially because I tend to figure out the colors as I'm going along. Right now, I'm just starting on the two opposite sides, the strategic analysis, complex systems. I'm going to decide which side to start on, and I'm going to work through the graph and think about it.
And then it doesn't help when he changes all his terminology and personology.
I bet.
That's a little bit irksome. And it took me a while to get down all of the all of the terms. And then I just wrote something there about, so the designing of models. So, and he based it on David Mark Keirsey. And David Mark Keirsey is really, really like INTP and TINX and LII. He's very much like it. And he's very much into all this kind of stuff. And people can follow his blog almost to see a personification of TINX. If you see his, if you just search for David Mark Keirsey, his blog, Edge of Order. I think that's his website, Edge of Order. Edge of Order or Edge of Chaos will be it. Right then. Binomial name, constructor designer. Well, that's not the name of the type. That's the name of the role variant. The name of the type is strategic accommodator. All right. Here we go. Now we get to some interesting part when we get into a bit of development. And this is actually something. Oh, she'll be back. Okay. That's what I mean about not knowing that she probably froze for a moment, but I wasn't checking. But, oh, she's back.
Okay. Sorry about that.
Right, we didn't say anything. We just fluffed around. Right. Interest, practice, skill. Any skill is acquired by practice, increasing precisely in the degree it is exercised and diminishing in the degree it is neglected. Neural cells are like muscle cells. If they aren't used, they lie dormant and even degenerate. Moreover, there is reciprocity between interest and skill, which means that we practice and so improve in doing the things we're interested in and are interested in things we practice and improve in. Interest reinforces skill. Skill reinforces interest in a feedback relationship. So the rational's lifelong interest in strategic operations, both arranging and constructing, fuels their daily exercise of such operations. So you see how it's affecting individuation. And as strategic skills, here we go, increase, then so does interest in them, precisely and exclusively measured by the amount of practice. Plus, also, they tend to meet people who are interested in the same field. And so they sort of get in and sort of relate. It's like with us with typology. We've met each other through typology. And so that's going to be a sort of a feedback as well. And it's like,
yes,
oh,
and that shapes the overall patterns of the role variants that we see for these types. Interesting.
Do you want to say a little bit more about that? About the patterns of the role variants?
I really want to get down to that graph down there. So.
Right, okay, right. What have I put there? Especially the case for women. Unfavorable circumstances, right. Right. There we go. Oh, wait a minute, there's a little bit under there. There we go, there. Right, so yeah, he had his, I've not seen it, but he wrote a paper in the 60s. His PhD thesis was on intelligence, and he came up with his own theory, which was basically, it was a sort of a social roles, social intelligent actions kind of intelligence. And that way, it's more fair to people. It's not the old judging a fish by its ability to climb a tree kind of thing. Now, in a sense, every individual has not one but 4 IQs, and it is simply not possible for one person to develop all 4 of his or her capabilities equally. The kind of operation practice most develops most, while practice least develops least. Unless stunted by unfavorable circumstances, rationals instinctively practice strategic actions far more and far earlier than the others, and therefore end up more highly skilled in strategy than in tactics and diplomacy, and much more than in logistics. Consider the following graph. Now, the only little difference that we'll probably get into it later on is with the logistics, in that there is a little bit of overlap between strategy and logistics.
I was going to ask how he, what's the Keirsey definition of logistics?
Well, he's got it as monitoring. So, and that they correspond to the social roles of the supervisor, best performed by ESTJ, and inspecting, best performed by ISTJ. And the other one is providing, in terms of like, supplier. No, that's it. Provider, supplier. So it's more good for ESFJ, keeping everybody fed and all the logistics in that kind of maternal view or paternal view, being protective. And then ISFJ is a little bit more towards more like SEI in terms of protecting people and their health, and more towards the protection than the provider. Hence, he called that role variant the provider protector in personology. So he changed the name of ESFJ from provider to supplier. And he also changed the name of ISFJ from protector to provider protector. And please understand me too, he called him the conservator. So it's like getting up with all this. And then Junior wanted to actually use the personality terms on the website, but hardly anyone bought the book. So he used the terms from Please Understand Me Too because it was far more well known. But I think there's a little bit of an overlap in logistics, especially for the NTPs don't really like doing the boring kind of detail stuff of inspecting and supervising. An INTP doesn't make a very good supervisor because you've got to be shouty and attend to details and make sure the artisans are working because they have a tendency to slack off at times. That's what I saw when I watched Tanks in Russia. There's not much of a propaganda channel when it showed everyone slacking off. All the artisans were slacking off, and they had this ISTJ guy come in. I think I showed it to you, Haley, Yuri Gatan. And he comes in, hands on it. You're not up here to pick up women. It's other things. I don't believe in liberal management methods. I want to do a hangout in future just on that guy, Yuri Gatan, ISTJ, a lot. Oh yes, but if you look at it in terms of functions, well, who's good at monitoring?
Yeah.
STJs, TE ego types, and you've got the NTJs, TE ego types. So there's a little bit of an overlap there. It's just that I don't think the ENTJ would be particularly happy with just supervising stuff, and they want to control it. They don't just want to supervise stuff for somebody else who's in charge, a sort of a middle management person. So they can do it, but that's not their thing. They want to be CEO. They want to be in charge and guiding people towards the strategic vision, not keeping the artisans in line to make sure they're working. Any questions about this, Amanda? Because I think you said you were interested. It does expand on it a bit more.
Okay.
All right. And here we go. So this.
The only. Go ahead, Ben.
No, it wasn't important. Go on, Haley.
Just looking at the chart here, I agree with what you said. I really don't want to be a part of what I would consider to be boring, just supervising and making sure someone's just doing their boring job. But the only time I will step into that role is when I feel that the person supposed to be doing it is incompetent and it's directly affecting me.
Yeah, and also, what about the role of the inspector? In terms of, say, that would be, Keirsey would have that as, say, inspecting somebody's work.
It depends on the context. It depends if it's going to be affecting me and what I'm doing. If not, they can.
Yeah, but would it be boring though to you?
Absolutely.
Right, there we go. So maybe there's an example of in Keirsey. Keirsey's right on a motivational level that NTs are not interested in logistics, but on a cognitive level, when you're comparing the NTJs and the STJs, the NTJs can do, it's almost like, I don't want to be cheeky, but the NTJs could do the job of the STJs. They just find it's boring as heck. But the STJs would struggle to do the job of the NTJs because it would go too much against their temperament of, or if they did do it, they would keep everything the same and concentrate on the efficiency of production. Lowest price and producing as lowest price and as much quantity as possible. They wouldn't actually think as much on the design level. Right there.
You know, I don't want to be cynical here. I guess I'm just being me, but
Yeah.
I've often thought about people being stuck, and I realize that many of these people, not all, but many, are very happy in their jobs that I would consider just, and I understand when times are hard, you need to make money, that's all you can, you know, I get that, but just being content in, I mean, again, like, I get this can be taken so wrong because there's so many different types out there being like, well, what's wrong with that? That's a great job. But for me, I just, you know, I consider that terribly boring. I would never want to do it. But I recognize and appreciate the fact that there are people out there willing and happy to be in these roles because they need to be fulfilled. But I sure as heck don't want to. I mean, but at the same time, I mean, they're going to turn around and be like, well, I mean, look at what you're doing. I would never want to do that either. So, I mean, there's an ass for every saddle, right?
I would never want to step into the role of supervision of any kind or inspecting. But I have a good friend who fits the social role variant and corresponding type of inspector very well. And he does metalworking and machine working, CNC machine working. And he does a lot of personal projects as well. And the eye for detail that he has, he's absolutely not a novel crafts person, but you could be fooled because of the production quality that he turns out. He's made a couple gifts for me over the years, and they've just gotten better every year. But I really admire, I think the satisfaction of a job well done for him and what that results in, I do admire, and I think it's necessary for society. And I could do it, but thank goodness I'm not the one doing it, because I wouldn't find the satisfaction in it that he finds in it. And I doubt that the job that I did would be quite as good because I wouldn't have that satisfaction. I would get bored and I would get sloppy.
Yeah, exact same here.
So I just want to talk about people getting sort of type going outside of their role variants. So we don't get into the trap of, because Keirsey never said that people can only do that thing, but their approach is typical. Imogen, oh, I almost said the surname. Imogen, ISFP resembler. She did technical art, and her brother also did art, and she types her brother as very much like ISTJ. And she talked about the difference in their approach to art, and his would be a lot more by the book. So that then brings me to the art versus craft debate. And there's a really good book to read, not before Story by Robert McKee. Has to be read afterwards. It has to be read afterwards. And that is this really good book by Stephen Halliwell called Aristotle's Poetics. Not the Poetics of Aristotle. That's a different book by the same author. Look at that cranium on there. Look at that cranium. All right. So this whole thing about technique, and from where following reasoned procedures to achieve a result, learning the craft. So you can see there how the artisan temperament, naturally they would want to improvise more, but also they're going to go to art college and they're going to learn the technique as well. So probably like this. I've got the perfect thing for summing it up. And it was something that Pat Patterson came up with. And he was talking about the songwriter. There are no rules, only tools. There's your mindset of an artisan. And the utilitarian mindset. There are no rules, only tools. And in Kretschmann, when he talked about the schizophymes, he listed classicists amongst the artists. So those that really want to emulate what has come before, to emulate the masters, that's more coming from the guardian mindset of that's the standard operating procedure, that's the ideal to achieve. Whereas artisans and those that are a little bit more flourish want to have their own individual artistic expression. So you can see how these other factors come in. So you can have an ISTJ craftsperson and an ISTP craftsperson, but they're going to be slightly different in their motivations. And so the ISTJ will be more craft-based, and the ISTP will be more there are no rules, only tools thing, where the techniques are used as a tool, whereas ISTJ, they're more following the techniques.
Yes.
In themselves.
Yes, and about this friend, I have said about him that his technique is so polished that his results look like art, but he would never, ever, ever call himself an artist if you proposed that what he was doing was art. Sometimes I see it that way. Say, no, like, I'm not an artist. He doesn't...
Call him a craftsman. How about craftsman?
Oh, he is a wonderful craftsman.
Yeah.
Absolutely wonderful.
Yeah. So there you go. I mean, you could actually have an artisan guardian, in that you could have somebody who's guardian temperament in an artisan job, but they do it in a very guardian way.
Yes.
So it's not just, so it's that old song, it's not what you do, it's the way that you do it. So that's a way to look at, so I don't know how an INTP would supervise, but that's a way to look at it. Not just what they do, but how they do it. That sort of get those distinctions between type and role variants, so that people don't fall suspect to stereotypes. Okay, notice in the graph above that logistics, in the case of the NT profile, falls far short in strategy. Note also that diplomatic and tactical skills, so green for NFs and orange for artisans. And, oh yeah, it's up there, you can see it at the top. I shouldn't have explained that. Sorry, Ben. Sorry, naughty Ben. That's it. Note also to the diplomatic tactical skills lag behind strategic skills, but outdo logistical skills, owing to the middling amount of practice usually given to them as second and third suits. Another glance at the bar graph will suggest that although NTs and SJs are opposites in the way they tend to use words and tools, so NTs, do you want to answer? Do you want this as a little tester? How do you think they're opposite in words and tools? Okay, I will take the pressure off. Right, so NTs are abstract in word usage and utilitarian in tool usage, and SJs are concrete in word usage and cooperative or compliant in tool usage. They are likely to be equal in the extent that they develop their diplomatic and tactical skills. Why? Rationals, like idealists, are abstract in word usage and do considerable introspection, so it is not difficult for them to identify with others and to talk in a diplomatic way. That's a little bit of the... It can be for some NTs difficult to... But you see how that deductive reasoning there has come in.
So, at the beginning of the conversation, Haley and I were talking about... well, Haley said, I think that everybody must do that. Now, outside the context of this conversation, if she was saying all of these things to me, the way that I would be responding to them would probably be a lot less converse than saying, well, I view it more like this, because I wouldn't be looking at the typological differences. I'd be looking at the similarities and differences. But I think that in such a situation as socializing, I'd be given to think that, oh, Haley and I are really similar people. Yes, I do this too, yes. Not like complicitly agreeing to everything, but maybe rephrasing it just very slightly in my own way, giving her feedback on what she's saying in a way that highlights the similarities as well as the differences between us without being a more formal logistical analysis. So I think that a lot of the similarity or a lot of the difference highlighted here would not be seen in social interactions, because of that abstract diplomacy, it allows us to take, Haley, the words another person is saying and apply them to our own frameworks or our own goals in the conversation, what we're aiming at, how we're seeing things, especially if the person is alike to you in some way.
Right.
Ben, I don't know if you can switch back to the chart graph, but you
Yep.
know, something else I would add
Go on.
is just for me personally, for my own FI break, I would actually say that my diplomacy skills or yearn to probably puts that almost last for me. Whereas I know as an INTP, you guys, I don't know, you're going to have to tell me how you feel about that.
Well, you can see there that this is one of the errors where we notice this because we know the limits of reason, where he's got to that place because of the way he's configured things.
Yeah.
Where it's like, well, if we're using just the factors of word usage and tool usage, and we're saying that SJs are the opposite, then logically, all NTs must be okay at diplomacy.
I can be very blunt.
Yeah.
When Ben and I are talking, just a couple times we've had like little road bumps in a communication because we've got the identity relationship where both of our FETI axes are like interpreting things differently. And like, I think Ben and I are both slightly self-conscious about whether the conversation was okay, whether it was actually enjoyed by the other person, and accommodating for these things. So it's like the diplomacy matters to us because it makes our life easier, it makes things smoother, but not that we're always the best at it. I can be quite blunt, but I'd say that I like to pick my battles when it comes to other people. Ben, you look like you have something to say.
I was just thinking about the way Keirsey thinks of diplomacy in terms of mentoring and mediator. If we think of INTJ as an advisor role, or like Henry Kissinger, I think Henry Kissinger might have been INTJ-like. He was the national security advisor for President Nixon. So maybe they can do the diplomatic roles, but they still do it in a way that's a little bit greasy. I shouldn't say that. You know what I mean? It's like they give advice on a different level. So it's like they will give advice on relationships on a sort of tactical, on a strategic. Well, if you offer him this and that, and then you can a little bit like an example, Haley, would be. Oh, I don't know if you've seen it. I don't know if you know what happened to him. Not that anything did happen to him. Nothing happened to him. Littlefinger in Game of Thrones. INTJ-like, I would say.
No, I'm sorry.
You don't think Littlefinger's INTJ?
No. I don't remember that certain instance, or even if I've seen that one.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's just that the way he's tried to like offer people and advise people, but they do it in an INTJ-ish way. So we were trying to reframe here, cover up for Keirsey, because there's just a little fault every now and then, because none of these systems are perfect. But and this is obviously a case where functions are coming in, such as FE break in the case of NITX, and FI break in the case of NETX. Oh, what have I got here? There's something else there. Okay. Yeah, you see, identify with others and talk in a diplomatic way. Yeah, identifying with others is going to be a big problem for ENTP and INTJ. Yeah. Right. As for so you can see how he's got at that place though by thinking deductively. So we've always got to, and you can see here that the reason why that's happened is that although that's logical from his premises, the other factor has not come into that reasoning, and those other factors are the functions. And you get a similar thing when you have functional profiles and they don't account for temperament. to these other factors that come in and modify things. But I think that some INTJs can be good advisors, but identifying with others, nah. As for tactics, rationals share with artisans a utilitarian way of selecting and using tools, so they, given enough practice, can get very good at making the right moves when in the field of action. Now that I do agree with. That I do agree with. So, for example, ENTPs can be good players of computer games. Yeah, yeah, and you get some overlap in the roles. Yeah, and ENTP.
Yes. Yeah,
So
I'd agree with that.
Yeah,
I'd agree with that. Even in using tools, I'm thinking of, well, to go for something practical and literal, lab work, I'm good at deciding which glassware I'm going to use based on uncertainty, what makes the most sense. But then otherwise, knowing what tools are going to be best for a certain analysis, knowing, in conversations, judging another person's character and then deciding which set of words I'm going to be using with that person. How is this person seeing the words that I'm using? Like, very much, I think it's important to be able to select the right tools when it comes to that kind of thing for us. Otherwise, we'd be completely useless instead of only 70%.
where do I get up to? Oh, there we go. Field of action. Right moves the field of operation. On their side, guardians share cooperative implementation with idealists and concrete communication with artisans, so they can match with rationals in both diplomacy and tactics. Right. Here we go. Strategic role variants. Here we go. Rationals all have strategic intelligence in common, but they differ sharply amongst themselves in the kinds of strategic operations they choose to practice. The two sides of strategy explained above mark the first division, with one side having to do with the order in which things are to be done, NTJs, or gamma NTs. That is, coordinating operations, and the other side having to do with the organization of things, or engineering operations, systems, models. Thus, rationals naturally set their minds to mastering the roles of coordinator, those are the NTJs, or engineer, those are the NTPs, and these enable them to play four strategic role variants, what I call the field marshal, ENTJ, the mastermind, INTJ, the inventor, ENTP, and the architect, INTP. All rationals to the core, but decidedly singular in their rationality. As in, rationality in that they give preeminence to reason. Let us examine the strategic roles that rationals are temperamentally inclined to take. Temperamentally inclined to take. Key nuance: types play roles. Psychology and sociology. Right. Bit, and then I do that. Where's that comment? That's got that purple comment that goes down there, and then I go back up there. Right. It's back to this diagram again. All right. The diagram below indicates the symmetry between the strategic roles and role variants and systemic work. Well, of course it's symmetrical. It's INTP has written it. Those rationals who develop their strategic intelligence to a high degree tend to gravitate to work with systems and to be preoccupied with the technology involved in such work. Note on the right side that work with systems involves both arranging and constructing. Arranging being for NTJs and constructing more inclined towards, or NTP is more inclined towards constructing. That arrangement is concerned with either mobilizing forces, ENTJ, entailing contingencies, INTJ, and that construction is concerned with either devising prototypes, ENTP, or designing models, INTP. So in other words, with the design and the prototypes, the ENTP, with its stronger TE, is able to externalize their systems thinking into a new prototype. All right. You are both moving around. Right. Oh, yes, I wrote here about directive. Right then. I'll just put that on screen and leave Haley to be overwhelmed by the blue.
Yeah, thanks. Actually, it's better than the other page.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so these are the stuff added from personology. So here we've got the role, because he's not really talked about it that much here. So you've got the directive roles of, well, I am coordinating, I am in charge, you're doing this and you're doing that, and you are beneath me. I'm the ENTJ CEO. And you've got the direction between, this is the goal that we are going towards. We are arranging the contingencies. And so there's a so if in that direction will correspond with valuing extroverted sensing and introverted intuition of time. And the more informing roles, the roles which would see more options, more aspects and things intermingling together, as a predisposition will go more towards these social roles of inventor and architect. And architects of systems as well. I mean, look at all all these typological things that have been designed. So there's a little bit of an overlap there between the interaction style. Now, Keirsey temperament theory doesn't actually have a Behrens equivalent for interaction style. So I'm just going to use the term interaction style because that will relate to both Keirsey temperament model and he changed the name from Keirsey temperament theory to Keirsey temperament model. And what was the other one? And Linda Behrens' system, and she taught Dario Nardi. Right, and Dario Nardi is a publisher. So the genus roles, the directive roles for coordinator. Oh, right, yes, so we've got all 4 coordinator roles, all 4 directive roles. Right, all the 4 directive roles are the coordinators, the NTJs are best at coordinating. The NFJs are the best at mentoring, either in groups, ENFJ, or one-to-one, INFJ. The STJs are best at monitoring, either, again, a group of people, you get to work your artisans, or more inspecting the work of people, more finicky, inspecting the books like an accountant kind of thing. ICJs would make a good accountant with their eye for detail. Expediter. The expediter roles, these are the STPs. Now, there is an overlap between the roles of expediter and the coordinators in that they're both utilitarian and both directive. So you can see, so frequently in business, you get STPs. The STPs act quicker because they're tactical. The NTJs are strategic and will take more unforeseen consequences, try to look for unforeseen consequences. So Donald Trump, as president, has like done things quickly but made mistakes in how things have been rolled out in terms of not planning enough ahead, trying to move quickly to outwit the opponents by just moving so quickly.
That's a kind way to put it.
Yes. Yes. Well, you know. Perhaps you could comment on that video that we did about Donald Trump on the psychopath scale. Did you think that was a good video?
I'd recommend that anyone who hasn't seen it and is listening watch it because it is a good video.
Yeah.
So.
He didn't qualify as a psychopath, but it was instructive. It's a sort of a guideline for FI break. It's almost like a scale of FI break. But that's terribly rude for me to say, but you know, I've said it. Right. Right, okay, nature and practice. What was it? Coordinators. Oh, wait a minute. I need to read that bit before I then go over there.
Sideways.
Right, strategic coordinators. Right, coordinator mobilizer being the role for ENTJ. Those rationals who are quick to judge and to make schedules are eager to take the part of coordinator. Right, so that's the predisposition. Quick to judge and make schedules. That's the predisposition. That's the bit that's related to type. They need to take the part the social role of coordinator. Coordinators determine who is to do what at a given time and place, and this role requires a directive character. NJs and STs are predisposed this way to being directive. Coordinators steadily increase in directiveness as they mature, such that they easily and comfortably command others and expect to be domained. So, Hayley, have you got more directed as you've got older?
Yeah, I would say so.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, just only when I feel I need to. But I don't have a problem with it if I really have to. And you know what? Getting into something that Amanda said earlier regarding how she will, and Ben, I think you do this also. You look at the conversation like, is the other person enjoying this? And I've learned to do that more and more as I've gotten older, and I understand. And this is a joke that I don't remember exactly, but I remember Ben, you talking about how Dario called FE like good for business, and yeah, I've found that it does help in certain situations. I have to make myself think, well, wait a minute, you know, I'm approaching this person, I might want to do it like this, but you know, if it gets down to brass tacks and I have to direct someone, I'm not thinking of, is this the nice way? I mean, I'm not trying to be mean. I would never, you know, inherently be like that, but at the same time, I'm not thinking like, will this person like what I have to say, or am I being polite about it, or I just kind of say, hey, here's what we need to do. I need you to do this, you to do this, and I'm going to do this, and we're going to get it done.
Yeah. Okay. And right, for TI and X resemblers, concerning accommodating other people in a conversation, a lot of it actually has to do with insecurity in FE, which is funny because we do it so clumsily that it sort of makes us awkward sometimes. I mean, I hate to say. So I don't think that the FE that I use would be very good for business at all.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah. What was I going to say? My foster mother is 76, and she's a 76-year-old INTJ resembler. And she actually gets quite concerned about scheduling, about keeping us on track. She's this concept about, let's have a plan A, and if that falls through, then we can move to a plan B sometimes. And it's quite funny because her desk is a mess. Like, she's so, you would think that she's early 60s by how motivated she is to do things and how active she is. She's really a powerhouse of a woman, but she really annoys me with the time pressure sometimes because I think there has been such a steady increase as she's gotten older, and I'm sort of a bit more willy-nilly, like loose about my schedule when I can be. So I think that she has sort of grown into that directive character, but in such a way that she's still clearly, she would prefer to, and I am searching for another word, but the one that's closest to mind is underhanded. She would prefer to do things in such a way that she can kind of swiftly coordinate things, like, what is that? The course style, that was, she'd prefer that to a take charge style of direction.
Yeah, in Keirsey, he had his own terminology for the same thing. He called take charge initiating, preemptive initiating, and he called chart the course contending. Hence, strategic contender for INTJ, strategic initiator for ENTJ. Someone just mentioned in the chat that Keirsey wasn't interested in what people had in mind. Well, he was at the level of temperament because he's got stuff in here. Let's have a look. It's because he's got here. So for NTs, we have. So we've got the strategic intellect here. We've got interests of NTs, orientation, self-image, the values of. So it is a bit where it's like a bridge between Enneagram and Jungian type, in that it does focus heavily on motivation. To such an extent, at the level of temperament, it focuses on motivation. To such an extent that Linda Behrens, initially she called, well, about 20 years ago, she called her business Temperament Research Institute. And then she changed the name of Temperament to Essential Motivator Pattern. And she's using the Keirsey Temperament, Essential Motivator Pattern. And then she changed it to Essential Motivators. So there we go. And in Dario's book, Neuroscience of Personality, if you go to pages, and this is a bit where Dario's been a little bit cheeky. He's been a little bit cheeky in this book, where he said that he changed it to a system of that Linda Behrens changed it to a system of motivation. It was already a system of motivation. Keirsey temperament theory was already a system of motivation. So here we go. It says here, later, Dr. Linda V. Behrens updated and refined temperament as a theory of motivation. It was already a theory of motivation. But, you know, oh well. Right then. Enough of this contentiousness for me. I have divided loyalties. Right. Coordinators steadily increase in directiveness as they mature. Oh, yes. Hayley, can I ask a little bit of a cheeky question?
Yeah.
So, you've talked about being directive with people who are not close to you.
Mm-hmm.
Are you and your significant other, who is also like an INTJ, are you directive with each other? Or are you different with each other?
Both. It depends on the situation, but we can be both.
Right. There you go.
And I will say that we both seem to understand, and I mean, when I'm being directive with him and he's being directive with me, I mean, it has never come up like, oh, you're trying to be rude, or, oh, I mean, it's just like we understand each other. So it's true. He's laughing at me. It's true. You know it.
Right. I think you're both the same Enneagram. Are you both 5 wing 4? I think that's.
No, he's 5 wing 6.
Oh.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Right then. What have we got here? This, as they mature, such that they easily and comfortably command others and expect to be obeyed. Davos, you will obey. I am the creator. We will obey. Right. We've had a lot of NTJ over the last week. Indeed, what? Indeed, coordinators are surprised by any resistance to their directives. Because this is so clear.
This is where, when I was younger, a lot of conflict between myself and my foster mother came up. Because a lot of times she would have a directive. I would not perceive it as a directive. I would perceive it as an option. I would have something better. And I would ignore what she had said. Or sort of tangentially follow it, subtly changing a few things here and there. Absolutely baffled her. I didn't understand. I was like, but I mean, they do expect to be. That's where it would become difficult for her, because as an introverted, intuitive dominant, when people didn't respond to her delegations, especially she, as a background, when she was younger, she changed a lot of the public home care nursing service in our city. And she did a lot of really good public service work in that industry before going into the field of foster work. She's quite an altruistic person, but she's such a tough love person. And I don't think she expects to be questioned.
She might agree with that Keirsey thing about NTs are not bad at the diplomatic intellect.
I was just thinking that,
Because that is that's a good nursing. What type of role variant would you say that is?
Nursing goes towards ISFJ. But also, weirdly, though, when you see nurses, like, a lot of them seem ESFP as well. So it's like Enneagram 2 maybe coming in there as well.
And she is 1 wing too.
Yeah.
Enrique
also identifies as Enneagram 1. He's very INTJ. I was just going to say there about your approach there was a little bit artisan-y, like trying to get around the rules. And that's a little bit like Adaptive inquiry.
I didn't even see them as rules. And she has this thing where she'll often say, if I did, because of course there's the FE back push against too much outward pressure. If I did say anything, I never explicitly said, don't tell me what to do, but she said, she has said, do you think I'm trying to tell you what to do? I'm just giving you an option that you might want to consider.
See, so you can tell from this book that it was just pretty much written for NTs. Like, I mean, look at this user-friendly language. You can adapt. Was it adapt? Oh, I don't know. It's backwards for me. You can
either.
Yeah, go on.
Where should I read it? You can either play the role of a compliant enterpriser or inquirer, or of an adaptive enterpriser or inquirer. You cannot play all four roles at the same time or place, nor can you play them equally well because your temperament limits your choices. Face it, you're born that way, born with a brain that is different from the brains of some of your companions, and the same as the brains of your other companions. Nature trumps nurture everywhere and always. You've either a logistical or diplomatic or tactical or strategic brain to use. Use it or lose it. Huh.
So it's not exactly friendly, but it's super INTP, this book. And so I was just going to put the adaptive inquirers. That's going to be SFPs and NTPs. So even though the functions are opposite, they tend to go about things in a similar way. So, for example, you've been involved in, both of us have been involved with creative writing, which is something that's more associated with ISFP. And composing is not that far away from design. The only difference is one's tactical and one's strategic. In that, I mean, I would argue that an ISFP is just a little bit nearer. Yeah. Anyhow, so right then, where did I get up to? Oh yes, this bit in. Oh yes, I think I did that in pink because it was funny. Coordinators are surprised by any resistance to their directives because it is so clear to them that others do not know what to do. Presumably because their goal is unclear or absent. You're probably thinking that about a lot of people, Haley. It's like, this person looks like they don't have a goal. They're just muddling through.
Well, you know, I can't say a few. It's been quite a few instances, and I really don't enjoy it. But when it directly affects me, like when I'm placed in a group, like back in college and, you know, school and whatnot, when I'm placed in a group, I don't want to be in a group. I want to be by myself. I want my screw up to be my screw up. I don't want their screw up to be my screw up. And so for the most part, I will say that groups that I've been placed in are just lazy. That's why I'm just taking it over. It's true. Objectively, that's what it is.
I have also, in groups, I tend to, when I was in high school, I would be put with less intelligent people, less motivated people, because I do have a particularly accommodating, this was not a wise choice for whoever put me there, because initially, yes, I'm accommodating, but then I get hard. I get hard because nobody's doing what they're supposed to be doing, and I'm not good at this. I shouldn't have to be mobilizing people for their time. I'm good at gentle nudging. I'm good at predicting what the outcome should be. Where should people be putting their efforts, and like gently encouraging them to do things. But at a certain point, I just do it myself. And I then tell the teacher I just did it myself. And the teacher learns that their plan to have me put the others to work didn't pay off. And they get a bad mark.
Yeah, that's happened with me so many times. I remember this one specific presentation in an English class. I had like 3 or 4 in the group, and I literally did the whole thing. And I made the presentation, everything. I sat up there and I gave the whole presentation to the class, and all my group just sat there. It said nothing during the whole time. And I mean, I didn't mean to make them look bad, but I mean, we had to present. They didn't know what to say. They didn't know what was up on the slide, so I did it all. And so after the class, the teacher pulled me to the side, like, Haley, you did all of it, didn't you? And I mean, yeah, I did all of it. They didn't do anything. They didn't even offer. So
I think this is, I was I've been stewing over that note about sometimes the trouble of adaptive roles for strategic women. I can't remember exactly what the comment you had was, but it was in red. And I was thinking how unlikely it would be for me to be put with a group of people and expected to manage them if I were a male of the same role variant, because I've like a track record of being outwardly accommodating. That does not mean I'm good with people. I think it got to a point where, like, I am really truly a blunt person when it comes to me being frustrated with other people and having a job to do. So it got to a point where I was just allowed to do group projects on my own. Not that I was particularly inappropriate in how I behaved, but I think they realized eventually how unfair it was that I got saddled with the task of managing others. So I got to either choose my partner or be on my own.
In terms of those people with a thinking preference, of the 8 types with a thinking preference, only the NTPs are informer. And of the 8 types with a feeling preference, only the NFJs are directive. So that's the NFJs. They sort of like, they might guide you with charm or not so much charm. If that are INTJs, or they might just do it in a funny way like Jonathan. I think all 3 of us love Jonathan's ways. I hope he's watching.
Okay, we're at so in the view of the coordinator, most people are operating blindly and going around in circles, plainly in need of direction.
Yeah. There we go. Oh, now it's got that. Now I can talk about that bit where that bit in purple that's along the side. Right.
I just want to add really quick that in the instance that I'm in a group, which has happened before, and I feel like there are people who they want to work, they're willing to put in the work, but they just don't quite know what direction to take, how to go about it. And, I'll kind of be a little more gentle in that situation because I do appreciate it, because majority of the time, like I said, I find that people are just lazy. So I appreciate it, but I'll kind of be a little more gentle and be like, look, objectively, here's where we are. You have great ideas. Now here's some other ideas, and here's where I think objectively,
right,
yeah, push
exactly. If people are willing to work, and I've had a couple of really, really great group experiences, it's easy for me to be extra helpful to them, give them the information, give them the resources they need, and then set about on my own way and then touch base later. I tend to give people too much benefit of the doubt in that way earlier, where I'll think, oh, if I just give them the right resources, then they'll work, because that's what I expect will happen. That's not the way it goes.
Yeah, I think a natural, it's almost like we'd be the kind of movie director that, well, if we've cast someone who's really good, we can trust them to do their thing. And if you get if you get people who are good, it's like a director is responsible for everything and nothing. And if everybody's doing their job properly and knows what they're doing and doesn't need to be supervised because they're on the ball, then no worries. The problem is if you're a director and you're lumbered with bad actors and actresses, you're pretty much stuffed. Right, field marshals arrange a well-ordered hierarchy that makes possible the chain of command and the mobilizing of forces. In their campaigns, these expressive, energetic coordinators commandeer whatever human capabilities and material resources are available and use them to execute a complex strategy. There's a distinction between the SDPs, complex strategy, such as was done by Napoleon in his 20 years of now. This is where you get a difference in typing, where Socionics thinks Napoleon was ESFP, probably because of his overblown personality. And Keirsey temperament theory think that he was ENTJ based on his strategy, but I think it was a bit of a donut because, well, if you know that your gun carriages are going to go across a muddy field and they're going to sink. Why don't you think ahead and have wider wheels on your gun carriages, on your artillery? That you call them your beautiful daughters, Napoleon. Well, why don't you furnish them with better wheels? You know, it doesn't take much genius to think about that, because that's what happened at the Battle of Waterloo. His cannon wheels got stuck in the mud. Right there. So I'm not letting him in the NT club. Right. But then they would say, yes, but he was coordinated everything and he wasn't involved at that level of detail. Yes. Well, I'm not letting him in. ETJs. Campaign in Europe by Grant at Vicksburg and Chattanooga. This is about the American Civil War, I think. By Sherman in his scorched earth march from Atlanta to Savannah. By Eisenhower at the beachheads of the Normandy invasion and the conquest of Germany. And by MacArthur in his Pacific island hopping, his reconstruction of Japan and his Incheon landing. But MacArthur was fired when he wanted to nuke the border between the People's Republic of China and North Korea. And I was like, that's the right thing on the tactical level, but not on the strategic and diplomatic level. Because Vladivostok in the Soviet Union is not that far away. You can't just have 50 nuclear bombs on the border to prevent supplies coming over. So that's why Truman sacked him. Right. Oh, what have we got? I hasten to add, that although military campaigns are the most publicized, they are by no means the most common form of mobilized operation. Any kind of undertaking, whether commercial, educational, political, or military, whatever, can be arranged hierarchically. Hierarchically. Indeed, must be if success is to be achieved, and the more efficient the hierarchy, the greater the success. Right then. Okay, that refers to something lower down. Masterminds. Here we go.
Here we go, Haley.
Yeah, intuition of time and in charge. Negative charge. Masterminds arrange things in coherent and comprehensive sequential order. That is, they coordinate operations by making efficient schedules. You could print this off for your foster mother.
This is almost exactly what she said earlier. Keep reading. This is really funny.
Efficient schedules, with each item entailing the next as a necessary precursor or consequence. Moreover, masterminds make contingency plans for keeping their schedules on track. If plan A is in jeopardy or is aborted, switch to plan B.
And I said that about my mom too.
Right.
I said that about my mom. She says, let's have a plan A.
Right.
And then sometimes we switch to plan B.
So who are these socionics who read these Keirsey profiles and thought that the mastermind was LII? Honestly, people.
I don't have contingency plans that much because I don't care.
Oh, honestly. Right then. You must have read a really bad translation. If plan A is plan B, if that doesn't work, then plan C. Often working behind the scenes, these quiet, reserved coordinators are able to anticipate nearly everything that can go awry and generate alternatives that are likely to avoid the fate that might befall the first operation. And so it goes, the mastermind ending with a flowchart of alternate ways and means to reach clearly defined objectives. Over to you, Haley.
Well, yeah, there's really not much to say. It said it all.
Right then. I don't know, have you actually done flowcharts?
Have I done what?
Have you ever created a flowchart?
In my mind.
Ah, yeah,
maybe a few times. But I mean, I just feel like I would rather do it
naturally in your mind.
Waste of time.
It's naturally there. I am the flowchart.
Well, I mean, generally, if I'm going to go that far about something, it's something I really, really care about. So, I mean, that information is already ingrained. So I don't really have to make much in the way of a flow chart. I mean, I kind of already know more or less what's going on.
Yeah. Yep.
And anything I don't care about, I'm not going to take the time for anyway.
Right. So then we've got strategic engineers. So the NTPs. Oh, wait a minute. There's a little bit on the side. Oh, yes, that was it. Generate alternatives. So what I've written there about that is this generation of alternatives by the mastermind, I think matches the idea in model G of the control NE. So NE control filtered by TE and NI in order to avoid a bad outcome. So filtered by the TE in terms of, is this useful? Filtered by NI, does this help achieve the objective and not a digression onto something more interesting? So the NE is filtered by the TE and NI, or in English, filtered by the sort of mottos of usefulness and how it fits into the plan.
That's such a great explanation.
And then conversely, if you have a TI user, an introverted thinking dominant, who is, we use TE control to make sure that the TINE filtered concepts are actually matching up with reality. So if I have this idea that birds have 2 legs, and then I see a bird with 3 legs, I'll adapt my rule to account for that by checking with TE against reality.
Yeah, and Carl Jung had that in when he talked about TI. He hinted at, quite strongly in my opinion, the control function by saying that there's a parallel process running in the background.
Yes.
And without it, introverted thinking would go off into the sky and not be connected to anything. And with TE, you wouldn't be able to do anything with the data. You'd just be the data with no interpretation. Because there needs to be the speculation of, okay, what is the significance of this data? What does it mean? So now I'll go, because then I put that bit. This is the motivation. NI, in my humble opinion, is a species of away from in NLP terms. Oh yeah, away from things going wrong, NI minus. NITX also uses NI plus, which is a species of towards in NLP terms. Right then, so strategic engineers, the NTPs. So I assume that you're both there. Let's see if you're both moving.
Yes.
Yes.
Right, yes. Right. Will it come back on screen? Yes, it's back. Engineers structure the form and function of the instruments to be employed in pursuing objectives and is the domain of the probing rationals. Right, okay, he changed the use of the word probing.
Inquiring.
Please understand me too. He meant probing as in probing for options. When he used the word probing in personology, he meant probing for options to advance. So he used it in the context of being directive in personology. So probing of options versus probing for options to advance. The directive, that, and especially NTJs and STPs, probe for options to advance. Right. Probing rationals, those who prefer to keep their options open and to follow an idea where it leads them. Now, any socionics person reading that who thinks that they're talking about gammas, they need to go back to typology school. Right. Concentrated as they are on determining the ways and means of operation, engineers tend to have an informative rather than a directive character, which is to say that they are usually eager to provide information and reports regarding what they are currently engineering, but not at all eager to tell others what to do.
Ben, honest question. Do you find me rude sometimes? You wouldn't even say if you did.
I find it amusing in the way that you are rude within certain confines. It's just like Jonathan. It's amusing.
I find you refreshing. You haven't been rude here. I don't know.
Oh, thank you
Refreshing is
kindly.
generally the word I'd use.
Right. That's all so you agree with that? Well, pretty much what you've said throughout, Amanda. That you agree with that. You're not happy to tell us what to do.
No, I'm not happy at all to tell. In fact, when I'm put in that role, it's one of the things that really... I'm not a very angry individual. I don't feel annoyance that often. It's one of the things that really frustrates me when I'm expected to manage others' time and resources and be put in that supervision position. It's not, it makes me feel anxious.
Right. So yeah, I don't believe Nikola Tesla invented the radio. I think Marconi invented the radio. I think Tesla wanted to send radio waves through the ground. So I think Marconi perfected it. I don't know if that's British bias.
Tesla was a good example of an inventor, though.
Pardon? Yeah. Oh, yes. Tesla is like also prototype for ENTP. In that, I mean, he trying to sell the American army on a death ray that could destroy whole armies. Come on, 100% genius, 200% bullshitter.
Well, I don't know. I mean, you know, I'm not saying there's complete truth to everything you hear, but I've read a lot. I mean, I don't know if you've ever read and discussing how when he died, everything of his was confiscated and
oh yeah, he had a lot of good
plans
stuff
for future research and experiments and stuff.
Yeah, he had a lot of good stuff, and apparently he had the ability to, almost like an ISTP, almost like Imogen, to like have like a computer aided design but in his head in terms of what he could visually imagine with his mental imagery and almost build. It was said, but again from an ENTP, so it may have been propaganda, that he could, although I believe it in his case, that he could mentally build the invention in his mind before he actually built it to see how everything would fit together. I think
There's
that's
a lot of oh, never mind, not important. That's conversation for another time. Sorry to interrupt.
Right. Well, write it down and then we can come back to it. If it's like
Ben, I really don't think it's that far off. I mean, just last night I was watching this this video talking about a certain kind of beam weaponry that they were just putting on this certain kind of military vehicle. Really interesting and quite alarming almost. But yeah, I mean, I really don't know if, I mean, I don't know if you've ever heard people say that, well, people who are people, right? But, you know, if you've ever heard anything like the technology that's available, you know, they're years and years ahead of us in terms of what we even know is possible.
in the military, yeah.
Yeah.
But you do have a case of, though, I mean, in the United States, in my opinion, not much has been invented over the last 10 years in terms of hardware. A lot of advance in terms of software, not much in terms of hardware. Because it's like, well, always, especially if you compare it to the 10 years before that. And I think that's because the United States industrial base is shrinking. Because, you know, I follow Peter Schiff. And and I think that you do have an industrial base, and then that feeds into the military base as well, in that your pool of engineers is smaller. You know, it would help, you know, if they only extended student loans to those people studying the STEM subjects. But that's just NT bias. Right.
Well, objectively, if I were to develop some kind of a amazing beam weaponry like that,
You're Davos now, aren't you?
Use it. I wouldn't want the public to know, or like even know that it exists. I mean, that would be better. I mean, hey, objectively, I'm just saying.
The ultimate weapon. Yes. Yeah, we recently watched Genesis of the Daleks, and Davos, the guy that created the Daleks, quite INTJ. Right. Alternating radio, inert gas light bulb. Yeah, but Swan perfected it, and so, oh yes, what happened? Yes, that bit's actually true.
The patent reasons.
Yeah, they came together and formed a joint company. That's what they said on Secret Life of Machines. I don't know if you can back me up on that, Amanda.
Yeah. Well, I've heard it.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's, I've heard it somewhere.
Yeah.
And I heard it from a source that was not Secret Life of Machines, so that's two separate sources.
That's a fantastic series, that is, Secret Life of Machines. Very
I
entertaining.
haven't heard of it.
Presented by an INTP.
Come on, I want to get into architects.
We got on to inventors, didn't we? Yes. Develop their skills devising prototype. Oh, yes. I can't believe I completely forgot something that I... Inventors must make sure their prototypes don't just make sense on paper, but work in the real world. There you go.
The extroversion.
Extrovert the thinking. Work in the real world, or else face the consequences.
That's a kind of funny way to put it, but...
Yes, that's very Davos.
Face the
Face the consequences. Can you imagine him telling off his INTP scientists?
Yeah.
We will remove these stupid emotions and still take advantage of his intellect. Right. Consider the international airport at Denver, Colorado, completed in early 1994. Doubtless the construction of the airport was coordinated well enough, but the devising of the automated baggage transport apparatus was flawed, delaying the opening of the airport for nearly a year. Whoever engineered it apparently was insufficiently skilled for the level of complexity involved.
So
Go on.
is the point of this implying that this is a flaw that inventors may have, or that they are best fit for this role because of their tendencies? Are they able to... Are they... Like, is this just an objective thing, or are they tying this back into type?
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense also with the functions involved because they've got that strong unvalued TE, and where of the two, I mean, it's fair to say that NTPs are interested in systems and configuration, and so the social roles of designing is not that far away. INTPs tend to design theories. I mean, look at all these typological theories: Galenko, Jung, Keirsey, Behrens. But I think it makes sense for ENTP when they've got the design of, and they can switch between the two. That I would say Enneagram 7 level 3, because not all ENTPs are inventors, but you know, a lot of inventors are ENTP. So they are the best at. They are the ones that are cognitively best suited to the role of inventor, in that they have these ideas, but they have that strong unvalued TE to actually get it done.
We were doing tie-dyed shirts yesterday, and this is a very amusing story with my ENTP friend and an ISTJ who's a mutual friend of ours. We were doing tie-dye shirts, and the ENTP turns to the ISTJ and says, "Okay, do you have a what was it? Was it a drill, a power tool? Do you have a drill and a pencil, like a plain pencil with an eraser on the end?" Just dropped mine. And we were all like, "What the heck is he thinking?" And so the ISTJ provides these things, and he puts together this contraption to make tight spirals in the shirt so that we can have spirals for our tie-dye, because otherwise we have to do it by hand and like pinch the cloth and turn it. He just makes turning machine. And he's always doing things like this. And this is a very functionally, I mean, I dated this ENTP for 6 years, and through the time, there were so many inventions, so many things like that out of nowhere.
And also Joe on the channel that I did the video with, where we went through ENTP and a coconut shell. She builds robots.
Yeah.
So again, it's extroverting, externalizing these systems. So you can see there's a predisposition there because of the strong, unvalued, extroverted thinking, which makes sense when they are thinking extrovert.
Now, in comparison, the architects.
Yep.
Move it along.
Oh yes. So did I? Oh yes. Imagine it. Yeah. Thanks for moving me on. Yes. Architects make structural plans, models, blueprints. To these reserved engineers, often working alone at their desks, drafting tables and computers, the coherence of their systems is what counts, and the elegance of their configurations. Oh yeah, I read that other thing. Right then. Right. The elegance. It just made me think about what Howard Hughes designed. Yes, I've actually written it on there that he designed a bra for Jane Russell, and you saw her yesterday. Amanda in the road to Bali, Endang.
Oh, yes.
Right.
It's funny.
With plans for building an experiment, a curriculum, or a weapon of war. Howard Hughes, for example, designed a wonderfully versatile fighter aircraft in the late 30s. He offered his design to the United States, then to Britain, and then other European nations, all of which turned him down. But Japan bought the plans, and when the plane came to be built and used in the Pacific Theatre, it turned out to be the Marvelous Zero. Now, I know he was in World War II, but I might be careful about the use of the adjective marvelous when some of your friends got killed by it, for which the Allied fighters, the Curtiss P-40, Brewster Buffalo, and the Gurren Wildcat were no match. And Hughes' Racer, and much later his giant seaplane, the Spruce Goose, were like the Zero, ingeniously designed, at least in the eyes of aviators. Right then, so the Spruce Goose, yes, a huge Antonov AN-225 sized Wuzen cargo aircraft, which was ready just after World War II and no longer needed because the idea was to transport stuff from the United States to Europe. Oh yes, and then about the bra. What's that? Oh yes, he also designed an uncomfortable bra for the somewhat Bathycopian actress Jane Russell, whom he cast in The Outlaw. He saw her talent whilst she was waiting tables. Right then. What have we got here? Oh yes, that's another note underneath. Are you both there? Right. Comparing strategic role variants. Every rational plays these four roles well, but not equally well. Rationals differ from one another in the structure of their intellect, that is, their profile of strategic roles. Some coordinators are better as field marshals, getting campaigns on track and moving. Here's the note. What have I put there about? Oh, that's probably about Rachel. Probably about R-Dub. Right. Such as R-Dub selling Santa's art. Yes, will she get it done? Bit of a... What have we got here for this bit? Oh, yes. I'll get back to that in a moment. Some coordinators better as field marshals, getting campaigns on track and moving. Others as masterminds, formulating a plan for operations. And even though campaigning is not contingency planning, these coordinating operations are interdependent and so can never be found far apart. Similarly, some engineers, NTPs, well, the role that befits NTPs, are better, actually it means NTPs, are better as inventors of functional prototypes, others as architects of structural designs, even though the two skills are often side by side, with inventors drawing plans and architects building working models of their designs. So you built your one of the brain. Consider the following chart of the four strategic variant profiles. Now, I've written something there at the side about ENTP, about the switching between the two. So, NETX switching to design mode, TINX switching to prototyping mode. Now, one thing you could say with prototyping is that you have a development process. And so that might match up with the process thingy in the reigning dichotomies. And when I asked an ENTP resembler about this, he said he followed his own process. Unlike, say, ESTJ that would follow the process of standard operating procedure.
Yes, observationally, the ENTPs I know seem to have processes in such a way that would match the socionics dichotomy understanding of the word.
Right.
Yeah.
Right then. Oh yes. Chart the strategic role profiles. Oh, wait, what have I done here? Oh, I've put functions on there. Yes. Just a little bit of, and you can make the connections yourself. So TE, TI, that kind of thing.
Ooh.
And then you can, And the opposites with what we got management for. Oh yes, okay. So if I
Oh,
zoom,
this works really well with the control function, which is called in socionics the ignoring function, quite often. Not model G, model A.
yeah, modulators. Right, right. Right. Note that in the most likely development of their strategic capabilities, the field marshals, ENTJs, are the mirror image of the architects. Oh yes, because it's also extinguishment, I believe. I think so, yes. As are the masterminds of the inventors. Thus, field marshals are usually better able to mobilize forces to achieve a goal than to make structural configurations. The reverse holds for the architects, who are better at designing efficient models than marshalling efficient campaigns. Just so, the masterminds are better able to do exacting research required to make contingency plans than to engage in technological invention. They're not that bad at it, though. And last, the inventors are the best at all. Oh, yeah, and the inventors are best at all at devising ingenious prototypes, though not the best at detailing a strategic plan. There's your control, then I. Still, even with their long and short suits, rationals will tend to practice and thus will develop any one of these 4 strategic operations well above those tactical, logistical, and diplomatic operations developed by the other temperaments. Portraits of the 4 variants of the rational type can be found at the end of this chapter, beginning on page 196. And it looks like we have reached the end.
Oh.
Now we have this interesting bit. We can maybe do a separate hangout on this where, actually, we can work it in now as a bonus of how Keirsey sees rationals and how they see time. So I'll let
Let's
you
make it a separate hangout.
Okay, yeah. I will take that directive. I will make that a separate hangout.
This is already getting quite long, and I think
it's a bit long for me as well.
Right then, so I am now turned. It's now on the ability where whoever speaks will be on screen. So then, overall, what do you think of what we've gone through?
I think overall it was accurate to life. We had that bit at the beginning that was nice, where Haley and I shared some personal thoughts that then later popped up, and I quite enjoy when that happens. It felt really consistent, and I liked the chapter. I think that Keirsey does a very good job of explaining the development of role variants through the preference of certain word. You know what I mean.
Predisposition.
Yes.
Yeah. Predisposed role. It's just like with INFJ. Even when they're not a professional counselor, they find themselves falling into that role with people on an amateur level. Right then. So, Haley, any thoughts on what we've gone through?
Yeah, I mean, it was great. Hopefully everyone watching found some value out of it, but I mean...
And you could almost say, I would say that it to me, it looks like concrete examples of the functions in action. So with the coordinating, especially with the contingency planning, you got NI there, intuition of time. This is stuff going off into the future. And then you've got...
Yeah.
And then with just summing up, and then with the NTP is the systems, things working in parallel, different factors. Well, what about this? What about that? And how they work together and configuring things. That lines up with TI and NE, and the other 2 line up with TE and NI. That's my summary. Did you want to say something, Amanda?
Nothing urgent, no.
Okay. And what about you, Haley?
I was just going to say just that whenever we end a hangout and Ben, you're like, Haley, how did you feel about this? You know, we're going over information. It doesn't really matter how, I mean, I know what you're trying to say, but I mean, I really don't really know. I really don't really know what to say.
Okay,
because
okay.
Information is what it is.
Right,
so-
okay. It seemed true to life. Did it seem true to life?
Yes, absolutely. So.
Well, and that's the most important thing. Right, so I'll end it there, folks. Right, so I will stop broadcast, but we're not all going to go puff.